I love the people of Zimbabwe. They're really neat people. Mean sense of humour, they're very welcoming and provide hospitality beyond anything that you could believe or imagine. Zimbabwe is a difficult country to live in right now. The economic situation is such that people are struggling to survive, to pay school fees. And with climate change affecting the ability to grow crops, people are struggling to even feed their families. Out of this, sometimes people feel as though others are getting an advantage that they're not getting themselves, and so jealousy arises. The need for forgiveness is ever present, where people feel that they are wronged by other people, and they struggle to move on past that point. A similar issue arises out in the West, where we live in an age of outrage, where people are easily offended by some things, either real or imagined, and they struggle to move on from that point. Right now, more than ever before, there is a need for forgiveness. People need to forgive wrongs, perceived or real, that have been done against them in order to move on for their own good. I want to introduce you to George Gikatera. George knows that I am sharing this message by video and is happy because his testimony is powerful and he wants to share this message far and wide. Back in the 1980s, there was a struggle in Zimbabwe then known as Rhodesia for black freedom, for freedom from colonialist rule. And there was a lot of fighting, killings, maimings, and a difficult period in the life of that beautiful nation. George, as a 3-month-old baby on the back of his mother, his parents were brought before a group of people and they were accused of sympathising and actually working to help the white people of that time. During that process, George's father was killed and his body thrown onto the fire. Then it came to the mother's turn, and the mother said, "No, let me put down the baby before you kill me." So she was allowed to place that baby down on the ground before she was also killed and a body thrown into the fire. Then it became George's turn, and the people who killed his parents were now wondering what to do with George. They thought, "We cannot waste a bullet on him. Let me crush the baby." But then they thought, "No, he is a boy. Let him survive. Maybe he will join us in the liberation struggle when he becomes older." So his life was spared, and he was given into the hands of an old lady, an old grandmother, and she was told to care for this baby. If he dies, you die. And the lady felt she is old, she has had a good life. If she dies, no problem. So she agreed to look after that baby boy. And George says that that old lady gave him a unique love and life beyond anything that he could expect from his parents if they were alive. One day, a son of that old lady came in. He was drunk and he told the lady to take that boy and go. He wants to destroy this house and build a new house in that place. So that old lady had no choice but to take the boy and flee from that drunk son. Another family took them in and cared for them. Well, George was not educated, and so he was of an age to go to school. But the elderly lady could not afford clothes for him, and so he used to go to school wearing a shirt and no pants. And he got teased by the other children for dressing like a girl. It was at this time also that George became aware of what happened to his parents. The children were teasing him at school, saying, "Who is this old lady that you call your mother? She is too old to be your mother." So George went to the old lady and told her what was happening at school, and she explained the full story to him. And so George decided to focus on his education and not build relationships with the children around about him who were busy teasing him. Another family stepped in to help George, and they paid for his school fees to allow him to continue that education. George eventually got a job, and that was able to help him finance his education. He managed to get a loan, and so his education continued. He continued on until he gained a university degree in science, focusing on biology. His grandmother wanted him to become a teacher, but he was now of an age where he had to enter the military and do service for the country. It was in the army that he met the people who killed his parents. A lady came forward and said, "I am the one who killed your parents." But George felt within his heart a spirit of forgiveness towards that lady. Several months later, the woman fell ill, and she sent someone to George to ask for money for medical expenses. And this really challenged George. Why should he help someone who killed his parents? But he decided that he needed to help her. And so he asked a friend to lend him some money so that he could pay for medical expenses for this lady who had killed his parents. But the lady died soon after, leaving George with the debt for the medical expenses that didn't help her. The lady left 3 grandchildren behind, and so George decided that he would help those grandchildren in the way that he was helped. And he eventually adopted those 3 children and helped them through their education. These 3 children, 2 girls and a boy, got through their education with George paying their school fees. One of the ladies became a nurse, another a teacher, and sadly, a few years back, the man took ill and subsequently died. The nurse, the lady on the right of this photo, fell pregnant and had a child, and now George proudly claims to be a grandfather to this particular child. Deep in the recesses of our mind, someone has done something to us which appears to be unforgivable. They may have said something which has really hurt us, and we need to work out what needs to be done from there. Perhaps someone has murdered a loved one. You can slip in your own experience at this point. But the question that I want to ask you today is, what are you going to do about it? We might try and shut that person or that event out of our minds, but sooner or later we're going to meet that person walking down the street. Are we going to cross the road and pretend we didn't see that person? Perhaps someone else has offended us as well. Are we going to continue crossing the street and trying to ignore that particular person or people, pretending that we haven't seen them? Life is going to be spent crossing the street, trying to avoid people. There has got to be a better way. Let's ask ourselves, what are we trying to achieve by shutting that person out from our lives? Are we trying to protect ourselves so that that event doesn't happen again or something else? Or are we trying to punish that person by shutting them out of our lives? People can wrong us, either deliberately or without thinking. And when we have been wronged, resentment towards those people builds up in our hearts. Relationships are fractured. Before long, it becomes like a festering sore, a sore that gets worse and worse. But we are the ones who suffer, not the person who has wronged us. and the devil is smiling. But if we forgive as soon as possible, we will not suffer. Instead, we have broken the power of that offence and the power that the devil holds in that situation. We are saying to the devil, we will not let that offence burn in our hearts. There has been research carried out in the United States that suggests that forgiveness is associated with good health. An American professor, Everett Worthington, whose mother was murdered, began a long study into the area of forgiveness. He found for those who refuse to forgive, there is increased stress, a suppressed immune system, and an increased risk of cardiovascular disease. But for those who can forgive and replace negative emotions with positive feelings of compassion and sympathy and empathy, there is lower blood pressure, diabetes, and many other things associated with lower stress levels. For George, he not only forgave the woman who killed his parents, but he gave her a hand when she needed a hand by paying her medical expenses. Sure, it was a difficult decision, and George struggled with that at first. But then when the lady died, leaving 3 children, he decided to adopt those children and call him his own and help them through their own education. There are 3 lessons here. Number 1, forgiving even the unforgivable brings freedom and blessing. Although George was young and didn't know what was going on at the time, he had been told. People were asking how it was even possible that the old lady was his mother. And he was asking, if this is not my mother, then who is? For this boy, forgiveness came soon after he realised that he had the wrong that had been committed. George has found freedom in his life through forgiving this lady. And he's also been blessed beyond anything that he could even imagine. Number 2, holding a grudge will not make it any better. George soon realised that holding a grudge was not going to bring back his parents. He had no choice but to accept the situation and try and move forward. Number 3, forgiveness is a constant process. It is interesting that a woman who was involved in the murder of George's parents came and asked him for money for medical expenses. We immediately think, the cheek of it. But George had to forgive that woman again, and no doubt he has had to forgive her again and again. Forgiveness is the act of transforming our feelings, our attitudes, and our behaviour. Not necessarily forgetting what has happened, but moving on. You're moving on from feelings of resentment and anger and getting to the place where you don't have to cross the street every time you see that person walking towards you. It's moving to a place of perhaps even meeting with that person and buying them a coffee or having a chat without mentioning that area of hurt. I believe that in George's example of forgiveness, there's an example for each one of us to follow. Sure, it was difficult for him. It will be equally difficult for us. But I think we should follow that example. There's an even greater example of forgiveness found in the Bible when we read about the Lord Jesus hanging on the cross. And he was able to look down at those people who put him on the cross, yet pray to the Father, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they are doing. Now, I don't know about you, but if I was hanging on the cross and dying such a cruel death, I'd be looking down on those who put me on the cross and calling for God to rain down fire and totally wipe out those nasty people. I'd be calling on verses such as, touch not God's anointed, By the way, that verse comes from the Old Testament. I can't find it in the New Testament. But instead the Lord prayed, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they are doing. And I believe that if we're going to be his disciples by following him and doing the things he did, I believe he wants us to forgive people in the same way that he did. God's blessing on you today. Amen.